So I'd like to introduce the session today, and then introduce Rudina as well. Rudina, first of all, lovely to see you again. This isn't our first rodeo. We've done this before. Process mining is often described as a silver bullet for an efficient organization, but the challenge is that just finding issues isn't enough. You really then need to take those findings and do something with them, and find some real world improvements. And in this session, we wanted to have that exact conversation with Telus, one of the biggest Canadian telco operators, and how they're translating process mining findings into those real world improvement opportunities. I'm joined here by Rudina. I'll expand a bit more. So Rudina, I know fairly well. She's an industrial engineer. She has a passion for using data and human ingenuity to build out those efficient yet elegant processes. And her career has spanned automotive, manufacturing, CP, consumer products, telco, and she's worked with a variety of operational excellence frameworks, including TQM, Lean, Six Sigma. And with those frameworks, she's delivered results. And in her years at the Process Improvement Center at Telus, she's realized the possibility of big data delivering that deep understanding around processes. And she's now on a quest with her team to use process mining to quickly root out inefficiencies to deliver better outcomes. I also know about Rudina. She's lived around the world, the Middle East, Canada, Europe. She's settled in Vancouver. And far more than me, she's an outdoor enthusiast. So you can often find her paddling the waters of the Pacific Northwest or out skiing the Canadian Rockies with her husband and her two kids. Rudina, welcome. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, James. Pleasure to be here.
So we had a chat together in June. I mean, it seems like ages ago now, where we talked about you starting the whole process mining journey. As an introduction, do you want to paint a bit of a picture of where you are on that journey today?
Absolutely. So, James, yes, hard to believe it's been 8 months. It's been, I'd say, yes, a really fun, interesting, and challenging journey. And so the team that I'm part of, where I sit at Telus, it's our wireline division, so providing home solutions to our consumer customers. And we're looking at the order to activation use case. So that means the life cycle from when the order is created to when we deliver service to that customer on their premise. And so this is a very complex process spanning multiple systems, multiple cross-functional areas to deliver on that order. And as a result, it's taken quite a bit of time to go through that complexity. The majority of our journey has been really more around, first of all, starting with understanding what are the activities of interest that we want to mine. So what are those process steps, working with the business owners to better understand those activities, and then working with our data scientists to understand where is that data that's associated with those activities, sourcing that data, and then really piecing it all together in the Minit platform to then have full visibility with data of that end-to-end journey. In addition to that, we've also have done quite a bit of exploratory analysis to really look at some of the issues that are within our process that are related to things that we're not meeting our business outcomes, and that could be in the form of our completion rates. That's a big goal that we're working towards to ensure that when we go to that customer premise, we can successfully install service right that first time. We've looked at some rework and variation in our processes. For example, that could be in the form of when we send a technician out, they need support, and so they have to contact a tiered support to get, and that's really rework. We should not have to do that. And so we've through this journey, we've identified some issues to really then go and look at improving those areas.
Got it. So you've been looking at order to activation, that process. What are the greatest findings you've identified there? So a key part of our findings is really identifying what are the factors that are associated with the issues that we find in the process. So as I mentioned earlier, a key area we're looking at is when we're not achieving desired outcome as it relates to completion rate. We do really well, but as always, we're striving to do better. And so that's an area where
we've used the platform to really understand the factors along the value chain that really affect our end outcome. And so with Minit, we can answer questions really quickly around, is there a certain geographical area that really is affecting my performance? We can slice and dice and stratify the data very quickly to answer questions or to validate hypotheses. Before, it used to be a big investigation where you would go into different systems, extract data, do manual deep dives, and then look at driving conclusions. But here we've built that infrastructure to enable us to really have access to the data so that we can much faster understand where our issues lies. So that I would say has been a game changer for us in the speed with which we can identify issues. And then secondly, another really eye-opening area has been the variation in our processes, is that it's in some of the variations that we may not have been aware of as being problematic, as we may have not been able to quantify it before. So now we can, ideally, we want to be more proactive and really set up alerts to identify, to detect these problematic areas before when they happen, and then action them in more real time.
Got it. So those, were the greatest findings. Was there anything else that really surprised you? Were there any findings that you didn't expect you'd come across?
So, like I mentioned, so variation is a big one. That was a wow factor in that we knew before variation within different business functions or different process steps or process lines. But when you look at it end to end, it really it's quite high, and so for us, it just showcases the opportunity that we have in front of us to really get even better. Another area that really surprised us is we would find sometimes with Minit, when we're looking at variance and the process flows, we find weird stuff that just did not make sense. And so it prompted us to do a little bit more digging, and we would question, is it the model that's not portraying reality correctly, or is it the data? Is it stuff that we're doing in the background? And 99% of the time it is the data that's really, it's a manifestation of how we're actioning that process. And so it really highlights some of the issues that we may have not been aware of. And so we can dig deeper and try to understand that. Like an example of that could be an agent cannot, for example, modify the order. So in order to provide that order, they will just create a brand new one and not wait until they are able to modify it. And so it really throws our process off. So then we were like, why are we having all these new orders? And so it just prompts us to say, well, because there's a system issue. And then we started asking further questions to understand. And in reality, this is really hard to find unless you go and talk to people and try to gather from them with anecdotal evidence first that that's an issue.
Got it. So you've had some big findings. You've had some surprising findings. How did you present those findings to a broader audience within Telus, to the different stakeholders, and how did they react?
Yeah, so we've done, we're still in the midst of this. We've done some presentations to some of the key areas, business areas of the process that we're touching. And the first reaction we get is really the wow factor. It's like, how are you able to pull this together? This is never done before. And so for many folks, they really see the power, and they are right away asking questions. And right when we're with them, we can answer those questions really quickly through the platform. And so it's really accelerated the interest and that we've garnered from the stakeholders that we've been working with to leverage the technology to quickly address business problems. And the other thing that we've done that we see, or the stakeholders really are incredibly passionate about is really how we can put this holistic view together so that we look at things more end to end and holistically across functions versus just being looking within our own silo. That's been quite productive in that it's really going to help us in delivering more that end-to-end customer experience versus just looking at within our individual functions.
So you've got findings from doing this process analysis, but you still need to get to real benefits. You need to get to return on investment. So that there obviously has to be some sort of process around how do you prioritize, what to do next? What are the opportunities you then look at? So how do you at Telus, how do you put together that pipeline for future improvements? What are the decision-making criteria around that?
So when we first started this journey, we had business objectives that we wanted to achieve. So that was our starting point, key metrics that we were trying to move. And so that's been really the predominant focus of how we go about identifying issues. And then how do we prioritize them is we use three main criteria. We use how does it fit with our strategic objectives that we have for our team? How does it affect in terms of business income, business outcomes? And that could be, for the Lean Six Sigma folks here is around cost of poor quality. So what the cost that we're incurring internally and externally to deal with this issue, to have this challenge. And then finally, the third criteria that we're using is really feasibility or degree of difficulty. As early on, we are trying to look at some quick wins. And then as we progress further, look at more big rocks initiatives that will take time and resources and to fulfill, to achieve. So that's kind of the framework that we're using to build the pipeline and then prioritize those initiatives.
Do you think there is a tendency to look at a small number of big wins or to try and cast a wider net and do maybe a lot of smaller low-hanging fruits? Is there a path in one of those directions?
Yeah, so that's also part of how we are prioritizing, is balancing the amount of, yes, quick wins that are easy to achieve, but sometimes those quick wins may not have the biggest impact. So we're trying to balance that with things that are more difficult but have also higher impact. And so we try to do both.
Is there an element of wanting to keep momentum and the focus around process mining up within the business?
Absolutely, and I mean that's where the quick wins really play a big part in really driving that momentum and keeping that motivation for us to continue leveraging the technology instead of waiting for something really big to change.
So tell me about how you and your team, and you especially as the leader of the process mining initiative, how do you get other stakeholders on board to actually implement to buy into and implement the improvements that you're showing them?
Yeah, so that's, for us, fortunately, that hasn't been a big challenge to overcome, as we were very clear in what we wanted to achieve by using the data and the technology. And because of our really solid criteria that what we're looking at as real impact as it relates to our strategic priorities in business, when we go to stakeholders and present them with the findings and in a quantifiable way, it's been really smooth in terms of getting support and buy-in to partner and work on those initiatives. So I'd say the biggest thing is really the goals and making sure that our goals are the same or similar as to what we're trying to achieve. And so we're helping each other get to those business goals.
I mean, I know when we've talked in the past, you've said that Telus that rally call for customer outcomes, is very powerful. Are there any kind of pockets of resistance in different bits of the company that might be familiar to our audience? Are there any particular bits where they go, it's not really for us?
I would say in terms of implementation of the opportunities, there isn't as much of a challenge other than prioritizing resourcing. So when we ask for resourcing and there is a lot of competing priorities,
Sure.
That's where the challenge resides in securing. But that's something that we work with, and with the stakeholders that we work with in terms of the timelines that we have to work by, given the resource limitations. I'd say the challenges sometimes has been that we've encountered is around when we're trying to solve the business problems is really sourcing that data, and all the attributes of interest that we have to analyze by. And this is because it's not always available. So the challenge has been around our IT data teams, although we've had a really good support from them, but that has taken time. So that's prolonged sometimes the speed with which we can move to answer some of the questions.
I mean, that leads nicely into kind of where I wanted to go next, which was around what are the biggest obstacles you see in translating those findings into real life improvements and benefits. And I totally get there's always a resource constraint, but aside from that, what are some of those other obstacles that you might face sometimes?
Yeah, so resourcing being a key one. Another one, the availability of our of the data. I would say those are the key two ones that we've encountered in really converting our insights into actions. There's nothing else that we've encountered as part of this implementation.
Got it.
And I'm sure there will be things that come up, for example, funding. If there is things that have to do with funding, that would be another thing that could slow us down and present as a barrier to moving faster and converting the insights to more to action and driving value for our customers.
I mean, certainly something I've seen in this kind of, when you have technology that tends to be quite centrally deployed, but then brings benefit across the organization, you do sometimes get that funding fight, of like, well, I'm happy to pay for my bit of it, but then you have to line up lots of people to give you that critical mass to be able to go out and buy, the right platform. And I think that applies to all sorts of technologies. But I think as businesses become a bit more holistic and are looking at, are understanding the importance of, certainly of process mining, to take this example, and how that contributes to many different functions across the business, hopefully those purse strings, those central purse strings kind of loosen up a bit. Where do you see the vendors? Obviously I work for a vendor, so I'm always interested in this question. Where do you see process mining vendors being helpful in this part of the process improvement project? How can the kind of company like Minit help you realize value from what you're doing around process mining better and faster?
Critical, the vendors. So we've engaged Minit in implementation as well as the improvement phase. Big part of the vendor involvement, in addition to building the event log, so piecing all the data together, the value that from my expertise where I see is really helping us sort through the data and sort through the noise and really start to use the data in a very focused manner. It's a huge amount of data. It can be really overwhelming. And so that's where Minit has really helped us guide us to zoom into the areas of focus by helping us focus on what questions do we want to answer, what hypotheses do we want to validate, and then show us how we can get to those answers through the technology. So that's been a game changer in terms of how we're using the data to make more informed and data-based decisions.
I mean, it's great. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's great to hear from, it's always great to hear somebody say, the team's been helpful. But I think the theme I get back from our engineers and from our pre-sales and sales teams is that sometimes it can be hard to see, the woods for the trees, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's the trees for the woods, and it's that there's so much there. It's like
Yeah.
walking into a video store. It's like walking to the old Blockbusters, yeah, and you'd spend 2 hours trying to find the right film. You're trying to pick what's the thing we need to look at, because there was just so much there. And yeah, there's an awful lot of noise. I think there's a common, this has been one of the big challenges for businesses for a long time, that in a world where instrumentation is becoming far more common, and this steady transition, the digital transformation journey that we're all on one way or another, knowing what's the very, very small subset of data you want to look at and how do you curate and analyze that data has become increasingly hard.
And in addition to that, I just want to say there's also, I think, the perception, or maybe the hope when you start this, is that the process mining will find the stuff for you, right? Like, this is our magic tool that's going to find the issues. But in practice, what you have is the infrastructure to be able to answer questions. And you still need to study the process and look at the data and have the context for the data so that you can identify the issue. So it's not that really a magic solution or a magic bullet.
Got it. Who are your key resources? So if you and Telus, you have all sorts of people doing different things, lots of different areas of expertise. But who are the key resources for you as a leader in process improvement, in process mining? Who are the really valuable staff members, and what are the skills that make them so valuable?
So I have been really fortunate in the team that I'm working with is to have some excellent data scientists. So there's 2 data scientists who worked very closely on implementation, and really the role they play is really identifying the data that we're interested in. Where that data is located, we've been working with some of our data architects to identify the location and how to best source it. And then building those data pipelines, which is, again, the data scientists that we've been working with to ensure that we have that data feed we need into the Minit platform. So those are the 2 key skill set. I've also worked really closely with some business analysts, and they're the folks who are more closely familiar with the business context of the data. So what does it mean? And they're the ones who have provided reporting, for example, on our key metrics. So we want to make sure we're also aligned with how our metrics are measured currently.
Got it.
Yeah.
Go on, Rudina, you had something else?
No, that's it. And then the actual business owners of the different processes, we engage them early on to become more familiar with the process. And then later on when we present the findings. But in between is really the data architects, the data scientists, and then business analysts.
Okay. Let's look into the future a bit. Do you see any limits to how businesses can use process mining and process insights, or is it genuinely something that can go really across an entire business? From production to sales to marketing to operations, everything.
I'd say this is applicable to anything. And I think the way, even how we titled this last session we did, wherever there's a process, there's opportunity to leverage process mining to better understand your process. And then drive improvements. So the sky's the limit, I'd say, in terms of where the technology can be applied.
And in our last interview, I asked you what you'd have done differently had you started the whole process mining project all over again. Has your answer changed, Rudina? Has it changed over time?
Yes and no. I would say the biggest lesson does remain the same, and that is really start small and grow incrementally. Even in a proof of concept that we did take on a really big process that was complex, and as a result, it took quite a bit of time. The other, and the same in our full implementation, this is a really complex process, so we used those lessons at the time, and we really tried to slice into smaller chunks for implementation, and then grow as we were building confidence in the set of the model that we had already built. So really following more of an agile approach to how you take this on. It's really tempting to want to do everything, to want to answer all the questions and get all the data. And we were caught into that situation a few times and then really held back and said, okay, let's prioritize in terms of what's really critical to deliver first, and then we can expand and enhance the model as we grow. So follow an agile approach, I would say. And then another thing is really have some really clear objectives that you want to achieve from this. As we talked about, it can be overwhelming. There's so much data. There's so many areas you can look at. But for you to be able to sort through that noise and really move fast, you need to have some clear objectives early on and focus on those objectives.
So I'm going to ask you that.
And then finally, yeah.
Sorry,
I was just going to say is keep your stakeholders informed as well. It's a big lesson in that sometimes you tend to go quiet because you're making progress and you're deep into it. But it's really, really important to keep everyone informed to really maintain the momentum and the support that you garnered early on.
I mean, I think that's one of those evergreen pieces of business advice. Make sure you communicate well, and we all kind of say it, and we get interviewed, we say yes, but then we forget. I'm guilty of that when the business is absolutely humming along. Sometimes I forget to tell my board, my investors, that, and I get the odd email saying you've been very quiet recently, and that's normally means good things are happening. But I agree. I think stakeholder management, which is pretty much what my job is these days. For me, in what you're doing, I think is absolutely critical. We have some questions. So that's pretty much all of my questions, Rudina. Thank you very much again. There's a few, more than a few actually, have come from the audience. So I'll kick off with those. So how many people are involved in your process mining initiative in Telus? And secondly, how difficult was it to get that initiative up and running?
So for our use case, the order to activation, there is a team of 5 tight-knit people that I'm working with to implement in our use case. We have a few other use cases at Telus, and they have a team of similar size that they're working with to get this first implementation going. And I would say that to get it up and running, it took quite a bit of time and effort in that we had to secure resources, funding, select the vendors. It was quite a rigorous process to get through it, and then engage the business owners to then look at their processes. So it's a bit of a journey that takes time to get up and going.
Was some of the reason for that time just the nature of the company Telus is, as being a national telco operator?
Absolutely, yeah. We're one of the largest organizations in telecommunications, as well as we are spanning healthcare, agriculture, a home monitoring system. So it is a big organization and things do tend to take a little bit longer at times.
I've been working with enterprise businesses for 20 odd years, and if someone says, "What's the one word you associate with the enterprise?" The word, rapid, never leaps to mind. Some people hesitate to start with process mining because they say they don't have good data. How was your data readiness? What was the data readiness on the Telus side when you started?
So when we started, we didn't know. But what we found out is that Telus is very mature in terms of its data infrastructure. And so we've been able to find most of the data that was of interest to us. Now, is it in the cleanest shape? Maybe not. So we've had to do some work in really sorting through what we need versus what we don't need. But other than that, I would say the data has not necessarily been an issue. And where we haven't been able to find the data, Telus, and it's one of the things that I love about Telus, has a really great culture in being very helpful. So we've been able to, with some help, being able to source the data, even though it may not have been available in our enterprise layer.
Got it.
So I'd say that was, quite helpful for us.
Another question. Could you please, Rudina, give us a couple of examples of actual improvement actions, things that you then did after that you learned from process mining?
So in terms of achieving our key objective of our completion rates, So actual things that we've been able to do so far, and remember, we're still in the early phases of improvements as we've spent quite a bit of time doing the analysis and understanding those factors of influences. An example is working with some of the regional operations to try and help them improve their completion rate, as that is one of the key influencers of our successful installations. Another thing is also working with certain sales channels that drive those orders to also increase their completion rate, and how they position their the order to the customer, because that's also, we identified that also is a influencer of our completion rates. So those are a couple of examples that I can share where we're starting to do some more work in achieving our business outcomes.
There's a question for me now. Thank you for that. There's a question for me now. James, how do you evaluate the readiness of a business to use process mining? I think it's a tricky one. I think, first of all, that there needs to be, we spend a lot of time educating businesses about what are the capabilities of process mining, what can it do for you. But I think, for me, a business that understands that is a really good sign. I think, secondly, where you have people from the business involved, as well as just IT, or as well as, central functions. If there's a dedicated process improvement team, like Rudina, you have, I think that's great. But I like to see people from the business being involved as well, because they're the people who are really feeling the pain, and they're the people who are going to really get the benefit from what we're showing them, for the instrumentation we can put in. And the last thing, it sounds like a really silly thing, is they need to be ready now. There needs to be something, a budget or a specific program or a specific outcome, because there are always so many competing distractions for any company in terms of what they can do with their time. Process mining needs to be something that they clearly identified as something they want to actually go and invest some time and effort and money in. If they're still, we see a lot of people who are still kicking the tires. And I want to make sure they're a bit more prepared to actually do something. Because, like we said earlier, this technology applies pretty much to any department in any company. For me, as a vendor of those tools, I need to figure out what's I know what the total addressable market is, and it's enormous. How do I hone in on the people who actually want to do something today? Another question for you, Rudina. We talked about what improvements, have you made? Could you give us an idea maybe where there was of that end-to-end journey on, some data you collected, it gave you insight into a root cause, and what you implemented to fix that problem?
Yeah, so one of the other thing that I should call out that we've been able to really leverage from the platform is the root cause analysis functionality. And this is where we can play around with multiple factors to give us a probability on our business outcomes. As you know, when we do statistical analysis, this is one of the hardest ones to really figure out. We can look at one factor in isolation, but when we look at a combination of factors, this is where it becomes more challenging. And so we've also explored this area and have identified 5 influencing factors that really lead to a lower completion rate. And then what we've done is worked with some of the areas that influence those factors and try to bring them together and see what we can do to improve that specific area, the processes that they're following. But also, we're trying to also become more proactive and use this information or this data, these factors, so that when in the future we have an order that meets that certain profile, we can intercept it before we are at the very end of that life cycle and try to study it or intervene and really ideally prevent that incomplete, for example.
Fantastic. Rudina, did you have one last thing?
I'm good, thank you. That's
excellent. Rudina, as ever, really great to talk to you. We've done this a few times. You and I have talked both, privately and in public. I think always the most useful thing to have people who are actually using this sort of technology talking about their experiences. It's far more, I think, compelling and interesting than anything we can say as a vendor. So you have my enormous gratitude again. Rudina Holmqvist, thank you very much. Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much, James and Rudina, for such an excellent presentation and for sharing your experience. We had some great questions. So before we finish this session, would you like to say anything to our viewers?
Rudina, over to you.
I'd say it's start, don't wait. If you're interested in process mining, I would say get started. It's something that will take time for you to onboard and to learn, but it is there's massive opportunity for process improvement by leveraging this technology. And no longer do we have to rely on sample data here. Now process mining enables us to really work with the entire data set so that we can be more statistically confident in our conclusions. So I would say get started if you haven't done so already.
I'm going to violently agree with that. I think there is a lot of theory and a lot of almost analog techniques in terms of looking at processes. We go and, we hire consultancies, they go and talk to people and they say, how does it work? And what you end up with is a bit of insight into how your processes are meant to work. And the difference you get with process mining, exactly as Rudina says, you're not sampling data. You're looking at every single time a process is used. If you're generating 30,000 invoices a week, we will be looking at 30,000 invoices a week. And yeah, 95% of them are going down the happy path, the path you expect them to go down. But they're not the ones that cause you problems. They're not the ones that make your order to cash slow down. They're not the ones that give you regulatory incompliance. So you need to understand where it's all going. I think in 4 or 5 years' time, we will look back and go, wow, do you remember when we didn't instrument all of those really important basic processes, when we were just relying on what we thought was happening? So I'd say, if you do it now. You'll look back 5 years' time and be very, very glad that you did, and you didn't sit around still running your business in an analog way rather than really going on that digital journey that everyone needs to be going on right now.